My name's Dan Stoloff, and you're listening to the Cinematography podcast.
The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
Hey, Ilya, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. How's it going with you?
I can't complain. It's been kind of a week over here, but I'm not going to really get into it.
Happy Father's Day, by the way.
Thank you. Happy Father's Day to you as well. It's been quite a Father's Day.
It is the Father's Day Mutual Appreciation Society going on right now.
Yeah, although people will be listening to this several days after Father's Day, we are recording on Father's Day because we're such dedicated fathers. My boy's asleep, so yeah.
Exactly.
So, okay. Ilya, who is on the show this week?
We've got Dan Stoloff on the show this week, which is really awesome. He is incredibly talented and maybe best known for shows like The Americans and, of course, The Boys. He did years and years of a TV show called Suits, and when we talk about all that stuff.
And I have to say, The Boys is awesome, but The Americans to me is like a high watermark in television over the last 20 years. It's such a great show.
Hear, hear.
So for our close focus, I feel like we've mentioned this before, but it's almost like this developing story that I think is a very interesting thing to cover because the Golden Globes, they've been around forever. Certainly, I grew up aware of them. I didn't really watch them because I didn't like watching drunk old people on television. And now I don't watch them because I don't really want to watch drunk people, period. But no, the Golden Globes are, generally like, they bring out a raucous host like Ricky Gervais and everyone gets drunk. And then weird movies like The Tourist win awards for reasons nobody can fathom. And it's run by a mysterious, I'm going to go out on a limb and say kind of shady group called the Hollywood Foreign Press Association that nobody knows anything about.
Yeah, that you summed it up nicely. Although I got to say, I quite like watching drunk people on television. So I like Drunk History. I like the Golden Globes.
That's I actually admit, Drunk History is great. But we're kind of picking up on a Hollywood Reporter story about the Golden Globes, about two Hollywood Foreign Press Association members resigning, calling the group toxic, and vowing to form a competing organization.
I was of the mind that you could not defeat the Hollywood Foreign Press, even when dozens and dozens and dozens of industry heavyweights came out and saying that, they no longer wanted to support them until they committed to institutional change. I was like, they're not going anywhere. And I even had my podcast, or our podcast, so I should say, our episode where I was like, I got 15 solutions for you right now how to change yourself.
I remember it wasn't that long ago. It was like 2 months ago.
It wasn't that long, but I was going to say that they didn't call. We didn't hear from them. That's fine. I'm not offended.
Screwed.
But really, it's like not only that, these two members who resigned have essentially called them out and called them tone deaf and actually said a whole bunch of other things about how essentially they are not actually committed to real change. And it's really just lip service. And they communicate only through lawyers and PR firms. And I want to read this one quote from the Hollywood Reporter article here, just because it was so scathing. The two members who stepped down said this. This is according to the Hollywood Reporter. The strategy to let lawyers and a PR firm do the talking has made the organization come across as tone deaf for months now.
Only months?
Only, yes. There's been no contrition, no humility, little recognition of our faults, no inspiring leadership. We do not wish to be associated with a group ostensibly dedicated to honest journalism and free speech that relies on the consultants and lawyers to speak for them in vague legalistic terms. In the spring, there was a window to lead to make clear that we understood how the HFPA could learn from its mistakes, how we could come out healthier through radical reform and radical transparency. That window has closed and Hollywood is moving on. I think that's quite scathing. They went from 87 members a few months ago, now down to 83. So clearly these two are not the only two who have left. But I really see that, these people leaving and forming a competing organization, if they can kind of sweep up the industry and get them to all say, hey, thumb their noses at the HFPA and join this new organization, that could do it. That could shut them down. They could disappear off. Yeah.
Pardon my abject ignorance. Were there only 87 members of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association?
Yes.
Those are the people who were deciding who won the Golden Globes every year.
Yes.
As compared to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, which is literally hundreds, if not thousands of members.
Oh, it's thousands. Yes, it's thousands of members in the Academy. And in the HFPA, it's 87 members, and there are no black journalists, which is really kind of like what sent up
weird.
all the... Yeah, exactly. Sent up all of the start of this stuff. You know, really, HFPA, I got to say, I agree with the defectors who want to start up a new organization. They had their chance. They had their chance to really kind of step forward, and it seems like
that organization will have 89 members.
No, they say that actually they go on and say they want to create a transparent, professional, and inclusive organization for the current and next generation of reporters who simply want to work together without the toxicity. And I'm assuming that probably means there'll be more defectors from the HFPA and probably a whole lot of other new people coming into the organization. So we'll see.
Well, I'll be very interested, and this is always my thought, not to muddy the waters with Los Angeles local arts garbage, but there is a theater organization called the Los Angeles Stage Alliance, or I should say there was one. And I'm not going to bore everyone with all the details. They had a scandal that I feel like could have been solved with a few heads rolling and a gratuitous apology. And instead, the organization just ate itself and ceased to exist. And I know that there's a lot more money in the movies than there is in theater, obviously. But the question that I had was, who will rise and take their place? And really there are awards shows that are big and legit, like the Indie Spirit Awards, but in terms of honoring mainstream films, you've got the Academy Awards and you've got the Golden Globes. And then obviously there's smaller stuff. And then obviously the Razzies, I shouldn't discount the Razzies. They honor mainstream films maybe better than anyone else. But
you have some film critic associations. You have some stuff like that.
You certainly have film critic associations state by state, but you do wonder if somebody, because you don't just become the Golden Globes in terms of size just because you're good. In fact, I don't know that they were ever good, but they were definitely loaded and were able to get lots of celebrities on board. And I wonder,
the Golden Globes got dropped by NBC, so it's not like even this year they're not going to appear. If they appear on TV, it's not going to be on NBC.
So it's just interesting to me, and I'm curious to see if somebody will take their place. If we need someone to take their place, do we need another awards show? I don't know. Ricky Gervais probably has the money, doesn't need the hosting gig, and I don't know who else they go to when he says no, Lisa Lampanelli or who knows. Anyway, I'm just interested to see sort of if a lot of people defected from the Golden Globes, would they be able to create an alternate reality Hollywood Foreign Press Association and raise enough money to do something as high profile and new as the Golden Globes?
It's a great question.
I'm not saying the Golden Globes are new. You know what I'm saying? Something new
Yes.
to replace the Golden Globes.
In the multiverse, they've already done it. It's like it's on its way.
Which also goes to because it is Father's Day, new Rick and Morty. So definitely we should check out Interdimensional Cable to see if there's a multiverse version of the Silver Spheres, and watch the Silver Spheres Award.
According to HBO, today is actually International Rick and Morty Day. So there you go. It's totally appropriate.
And then comes right back to the Golden Globes. Anyway.
All right. So, Ben, let's get to the interview with Dan Stoloff.
Let's do it.
The Cinematography Podcast Interview.
Dan Stoloff, cinematographer, thank you so much for being on Cinepod, the Cinematography Podcast. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm great. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners, viewers.
So Dan, you've been shooting for a couple of weeks now. You've got a long career with a million titles. We can't get into your entire back catalog today, but I'm going to cherry pick a few. And one of the things I really want to talk about, perhaps the most, is The Boys, which is this Amazon series that has the look of sort of big budget, glossy superhero style movies and television shows, but it has this very sort of subversive anti-hero quality, whereas the heroes are not really the heroes of the story. And I know you're coming in here now in the second season. Is there anything in particular that you're trying to bring to the visual style of the story that further enhances or goes along with this, subversive narrative of like we're giving you all the trappings of a big budget superhero, but really we're sneaking in a different sort of story? How does the big overarching theme of the project inform what it is that you're doing?
Well, I would disagree that it's a superhero story. I mean, these people are, quote, heroes, but in reality, as we get to know them, we realize that they're anything but. Our show really is more of a prism with which to look at celebrity, politics, media, and using the superhero genre as a kind of a brilliant lens to exploit some of these things. In our world, we try to keep it really grounded. We try to not make it too fantastical so that it's relatable. If, for example, superheroes were to exist in society today, this is what it would look like. And this is what might happen to them. And this is what our culture, this is what our society, this is what we would do with them. We would turn them into celebrities. We would exploit them. We would make money off of them. We would track their popularity. We would have charts and graphs and all kinds of things. We'd have reality shows. And this is the world that our show is depicting. What makes it different from a superhero or classic superhero, your Spider-Man or whatever, any one of those superhero things is, when you see and I don't want to pick on Spider-Man. I could pick anybody, but you see Spider-Man throw a bus or something to stop his person. What you don't see are the 53 people who are collateral damage who were killed. And I think probably what inspired this comic, the graphic novel, was the thought that, hey, wait a minute, we're just moving along forward in our story. What about the rear view? What about all those people who were killed? What about all the children? What about everything else? And so I think that sparked kind of a sense of reflection and responsibility to say, these stories are absurd. These stories are dangerous. These stories are fantastical and not true to life. Let's put it true to life and see what happens. And wonderful experiment. And it's been a blast. It really has been a blast. I mean, I could go on. I know you have specific questions, so I'm going to let you sort of drive this.
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, it is a lot of fun. And you mentioned a couple of things just a moment ago. The show definitely does feel grounded. It feels grounded in reality, despite being this conceit that something fantastical is going on, that there's these people, and I'm not going to go into too many spoilers, but there are these superheroes that are being born or created, and the world that they live in is kind of got this dichotomy going on of like super fantastic and also reality. You've got sort of also two competing groups. You've got a group of the superheroes and a group of the essentially anti-heroes. And you've got two different looks that kind of go along with that too. Can you talk a little bit about trying to adjust the worlds of the superheroes in the towers and the world of the anti-heroes in the basement, in the shadows?
Well, if I could, I would speak to the beginning of the show before I came on board. The first season, there was a distinction. There was a definite distinction, and it was a photographic distinction too, whereas the world of the boys was a little more jagged and handheld and a little rougher looking, whereas the world of the superheroes was a lot slicker. And for risk of oversimplification, the boys' world might be handheld and the superheroes might be Steadicam. Now, that said, that's kind of how the show found its origins and began. The worlds have started to intersect a lot, and the visual styles have started to intersect a lot. I would say that we do a lot less fluid work now. I mean, there are times like if we're in a movie within a movie, we'll use the technique of the movie, which would be big techno crane shots and fluid and all that. Then you cut to behind the scenes, and it's going to be more handheld and that sort of thing. But as the characters are interrelating and their worlds are meshing and colliding and everything is sort of collapsing on itself, everything's gotten a little bit more ragged these days.
I know that you're coming into this project's second season. You didn't set the look, but I definitely feel like you've taken the look that was established in first season and you've continued with it, but also applied a little bit of your own spin. And I feel like you're definitely a fan of lower key lighting and contrast. And can you talk about a little bit how you're changing the light level or the feeling of different qualities of light depending on if you're in the tower, the worlds intersecting, or in the basement, so to speak? You've got these different, I feel like distinctive looks going on, and they are blending together. But how do you approach those?
Well, I never set out consciously to change the look. I came on board and I loved the way the show looked, and I felt like there was more that could be done with homage to the graphic novel. That there were certain frames. In fact, in my meeting with Eric Kripke, my initial meeting, I brought up like 50 images from the comic books. And I said, these are really cool frames that I feel like you're missing this opportunity. And a lot of them were graphic. They were pure black silhouette, butcher in the foreground and a park bench in the background. And it was very liberating in a lot of ways because it was very extreme. And I felt like the look of the show was great, but I felt like there was more that we could do without turning it into a comic book movie. But there is this, we do owe lineage to this style, and I wanted to try to draw some of that back into the show. And as far as the low key, I prefer naturalism, and if a scene feels emotionally dark, or if the environs lend themselves to that, I'm gonna go in that direction. That's just my default. That's my Eastern European heritage, maybe. I don't know it. I just love the chiaroscuro and the richness and the darkness. So I'm gonna gravitate towards that. Now, that being said, this show gives us the opportunity to do so many different things that exist within the world that we have to do our homework, and we must be true to that, to what that world is, whether it be a commercial that's playing, whether it be a newscast, which we shoot all our own newscasts, whether it be, this season we did, not to get too in detail with it, but we did like a Grammy Awards sort of thing. And so it was an opportunity to do live event lighting on a big scale that I've never had to do before. Then there's the Dawn of the Seven, which you saw in season 2, the beginning of it, where we got to like strap on and make a real hero movie and give it a look and, push it really hard. And it was great because, it's so different. The next day I might be doing a scene in a grungy garage. It might be a back alley. It could be a house in the country. We go to so many different places within 60 miles of Toronto to create our world that it's never boring and it's never the same twice. So I try to sculpt it and shape the performers to give it as much dimension as I can. We're taking a 3-dimensional world and we're presenting it in 2 dimensions to have the illusion of 3 dimensions. And that's always a challenge for me, whether it be with camera movement or whether it be with lighting or whether it be subtractive lighting. By that I mean darkening something, putting a big black wall up next to an actor so that only the light from the left side is reaching his face. On the right side, it stays very dark. I do that a lot. I do a lot of that. And I have in my career all the way back.
You brought up some of the fun stuff that you get to do, the movies within the movie, the shows with the TV within the TV show. I think this is really fertile ground here because The Boys has a glossy look just sort of in general. It doesn't feel like, a small independent production, or it doesn't feel like, it was low budget. It feels big budget. But then when you do cut into, the hero feature film that is inside the series, there is a very distinctive shift that happens. Can you talk a little bit about what elevates, what changes that look there to make it feel more like cinema besides, letterboxing? What other techniques are you getting into? Are you getting into shallower depth of field? Or are you getting into anything else that's like the telltale, the thing that an audience is going to clue into? What is it for you that clues in the big budget look?
I think it's a cumulative thing. I don't think it's any one thing individual. And the other thing is the contrast, of course, that makes it suddenly pop. And to give you an example, to go back to season 2 in episode 5, with the Dawn of the Seven episode, we're in the movie. We're very much in the movie. It's long takes. It's a big, long techno crane shot, which is not something that in our world we do a lot of. So that's a part of it. It's heavy backlight. It's the scope and scale of the set with the bus on its side and the police car and the fire and the explosions, the crashed helicopter. It's all of those elements, the giant painted backdrop. It's all those elements. It's cumulative. And then when you cut to the director saying, cut, 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 and he walks out, it's a color change. It's a technique change. It's still the same lensing. I'm using anamorphic lenses, which which are the same lenses that, say, Steven Spielberg used to shoot E.T. So there's a kind of classic, old school look to what we do. In that case, it's that world is anamorphic that I'm creating. When we do another world that might be a television talk show, I use spherical lenses and shoot it at 16:9, so that within its DNA, we're being true to the source material. We're really, we're digging as deep as possible to try to make it as authentic as possible. And I think the answer is it's cumulative. It's not one thing. It's all of those things. It's the LUT. It's the way we made it look sort of yellow, black and white, kind of weird, like no world ever looks like that. Maybe Mars does. But in our experience, that's a fantasy. That's a popcorn munching weekend, hot day in the summer fantasy. The reality, it's a little cooler. It's less saturated. The camera's bouncing on the shoulder of the operator, Adam Tupper, not to negate anything Adam does. He is one of the smoothest handheld operators. Oftentimes I have to tell him to make it look more handheld, stumble a few times, make a mistake. The focus pullers, overcorrect and come back. Let it be spontaneous. Be late for your pull. Don't pull. Don't pretend you know the dialogue. Wait for the dialogue and react to it. So it's all those kind of details. Whereas in the Dawn of the Seven movie, those focus pulls would be right on the breath. They would be dialed in. It would have so it's all of that stuff, all those little details added together, I think make it look different from make the episodes within the episodes look different.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm going to steal a question actually from my co-host of this program. He loves to ask this, but when approaching any sort of scene, do you initially try to find a frame and then light within the frame? Or do you try to bring light to an environment and then find the frame within the scene after it's been lit?
Wow, that's such an interesting question. I see them as so interrelated. I don't really see where one begins and one ends, to be honest with you. It all kind of comes together for me. Oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes we'll start with a masker, which is great because it sort of sets the tone for the whole scene. It's more broad. It sets the environment for the light. It sets the logic for the light, which you're going to follow through in all of your coverage. So I guess it's all happening. All those neurons are firing spontaneously. I couldn't break it down and say which is which. It's interesting. I once had an experience where I was alternating with another DP. And one of the operators said to me, it's so interesting. It's so different the way that you and this other person work. He said, as an operator, he would set his lights and he'd say, you figure it out. You find the shot you find the frame within the lights. I'm not moving the lights. I was kind of gobsmacked. I was a little bit horrified because I don't know. I just see them all as one. I don't see one as more reigning supreme over the other. Of course, there's a time when I need the backlight coming in, if he's holding up a vial of a V or whatever, and it's got to be just so, and that's a specific situation. But to me, the frame and the light, they're married together. They're inexorable from each other.
Dan, I want to jump back a little bit in time. I guess the first thing of yours that I ever saw on television and saw as it was happening, as it was first run, would have been The State. So I was
oh my God! Wow, you're going way back.
I was a fan of The State. I loved Thomas Lennon and the whole crew. I thought it was a lot of really fun sketch comedy happening at that time. Take us back to that sort of era. Really early in your career. How did you get to that sort of thing? Give us your backstory. Tell us how you.
Oh my God! For The State. Well, let me see. At the time, I was living in New York City. This would have been, I'm going to say, early '90s.
Yeah, that's when it was. Yeah.
I had been living and working in Boston and had a moderately successful career as a local cinematographer in Boston. I felt a little frustrated. I felt a little boxed in, and it was time to go. So I moved to New York. And one of my first gigs in New York was working for Broadway Video, because I had done a bunch of claymation back in Boston with a company called Olive Jar, and Broadcast Video was doing a lot of that kind of stuff, plus other stuff. And I just kind of got into their roster, and I was shooting all kinds of stuff. And somehow or other, around that time, I got a call to do The State. They were shooting 16 millimeter, these sketches that I knew nothing about. And I went and I met the guys. I loved them. I later did a film with Michael Ian Black directing. I worked with Joe on another film. our paths keep crossing and bumping into each other as time goes on. And now this is what, 30 years ago, 40 years ago? It's a long time ago. But yeah, they brought me in and we did a few sketches. The most memorable was Porcupine Racetrack. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it was in the style of an MGM musical of the 40s. And it was just a blast. It was the most fun I had ever had. I mean, so we were all kids. Those guys were NYU students at the time making the show. And yeah, it was a one-day thing. It was probably 18-hour day on a stage that wasn't big enough to do the kind of things that we wanted to do. We had like a tulip crane and we did all these moves. And I just thought these guys are so incredibly talented and so funny. And then I went on and did, I don't know, maybe half a dozen different sketches from time to time while I was doing commercials and other things in New York.
All right. Well, let's jump ahead. I mean, you've got a ton of work between the state, all through the 90s and to the 2000s until we get to what was a huge hit for the USA Network, Suits. And I know you worked for like 4 years on that show, and it has a glossy, very polished look. I know that you didn't set the look initially for that show, but you definitely did a ton of work of like, I don't know if it was mostly stage or on location, but it's a big budget USA series type of thing. Plot the trajectory of your career between doing indie features and commercials and all kinds of different stuff to then getting into this, big USA franchise series. Yeah.
Sure. The way that worked was, like you had mentioned in the 90s, I was doing a lot of commercials. I was doing a lot of music videos. Around 2000, 2010, Sopranos came out and my eyes got big and I thought, wow, television, I never even thought of that as a viable artistic expression, because at the time television was pretty, it was just not that. It was other things, but it was not that. So what happened was I had been doing a lot of independent features, like mid-level, low budget, like $5 million movies. I'd been doing those one after the other. Some of them did better than others. But then the banking crisis happened in 2008. Things really slowed down a lot. And I found myself wondering what the next thing was. So I had a great friend I was living in LA at the time, living in Topanga. And I had a great friend through my daughter, through school and everything else, Michael Cattleman, who's a director, producer. We became fast friends. It took about 3 years, but he kept trying to get me on. He kept trying to bring this kid on, this kid who had never done TV. And of course, people in those decision-making positions, they don't want to risk anything. It's all about minimization of risk. So it was an uphill battle. Anyway, he got a show in New Orleans called Memphis Beat with Jason Lee and Alfre Woodard. And it was the second and last season of that show. But we went and did that. That was my first foray into television. I'll tell you something. After day one, I said, this is where I belong. I love this. Just the precision of it, the continuity of it. Remember, I had been doing independent features, which meant the financing kept falling through or changing or whatever. This was like, all of a sudden, someone's taking care of us. We don't have to worry about it. We just get to tell our story. So we did that for a season. And on that show, I met a director by the name of Anton Cropper. We became good friends, and Anton went on to do another USA show called Fairly Legal up in Vancouver. And so I went and I did a season of that. That was my second show. Sometime towards the end of that season, Anton called me up and he said, I think they're asking me to do Suits. Are you interested? This was season 3 of Suits. So yes was the answer. So we went to Toronto and I did 5 seasons. Parts of 5 seasons, about 50 episodes in all. And I felt like Suits was really, for me, graduate school in a lot of ways. I mean, it was a TV show that existed, fantastic cast, that looked amazing, that needed to look amazing in every shot. And it was a joy. It was a lot of fun to work with them and to light them. And, it was interesting because one of the lead of that show, Gabriel, on my, maybe 3 weeks into my first season, he calls up for a meeting with me. He's like, I don't like what you're doing. I don't like how dark the side of my face is. One side is light and one side is dark. Why can't both sides be light? And I love Gabriel to death. But and he actually later he directed a couple episodes that I shot, and I just love the guy. But he wasn't, so I showed him some chiaroscuro. I showed him some old paintings. I said, this is kind of more like what I'm trying to do. And, he scratched his head and he was a little wary. And of course, these guys this is their career and they're trusting us to present them to the world. It's a lot of responsibility and it's a lot of pressure. And eventually, I think I kind of won him over. I softened it. I softened the contrast. I let the wrap happen more gently so that it didn't look so stark, although there were scenes that I kept it stark for reasons. Late at night, he's working, burning the midnight oil. I'd light it stark. That's what you do. I mean, that's the right thing for that particular scene. But it was a great journey, and I made a lot of friends on that show, and I learned a lot about reflections and glass and shooting through multiple levels of glass. And and it comes back to me whenever I'm doing, even in The Boys, we do boardroom scenes and things like that, and I get flashbacks of, how did I do this then? And all the fun things you can do. You can shoot from outside the stage in the window. You can do that. Use the translight as a reflection. It's really fun. There's a lot of stuff you can do. Or using the translight when I'm not looking at it, I use the translight as a bounce. So the light coming off the sky and off the city has a more naturalistic quality. Everything blends in, so that secondary light hitting the actor's face off of a big bounce might have some of the cool of the sky. It might have some of the warmth of the buildings, but it's a way of getting me closer to natural. Like, what is natural? If you're standing in a building and the sun is shining on the block across, what does the light look like on you? I mean, there's a pink building, a yellow building, a red building? I mean, all of that, it's like a big bucket of paint and you're mixing all these colors. But that was a great experience for me and a great opportunity to sort of look into the cosmetic aspect. All the stuff I had learned doing toothpaste commercials really came in handy. I mean, it all comes in handy. Everything comes in handy. Everything you ever do as a cinematographer is in your bag of tricks. So there are no unimportant jobs. There are no small jobs. You've really got to have that attitude that, even if you get called out to shoot your brother-in-law's bar mitzvah, whatever, make it an opportunity and meet some people, because it's a people business. And like I explained with getting to Suits, there's a journey to every destination that is littered with the relationships that you make. Very rarely in my career have I ever been high. I mean, it's happened, but it doesn't happen as much where I am just a cold call and I get the job. You know what I mean? I do give a pretty good meeting, but if you're a director and you've been working with somebody for years and years and the producer says, well, you have to do your due diligence, you have to interview 4 people, you're in that situation. It's just really hard. It's really frustrating. But a situation like where Michael Cattleman or Anton Cropper call me up and say, hey, I've got a show. Are you interested in doing it? That's the joy that these relationships bring.
That's a wonderful synopsis and a ton of incredible advice out there to anyone who's just starting out in this space. And I got to say that a large demographic for our podcast is people who are young DPs or in film school and that sort of thing. So I really hope that our listeners all pay really close attention to all the words that you just said, because so much of your career will be about replicating things that you may have done hastily or quickly or had to learn in the heat of battle in a moment, more polished later after you get another opportunity. And so many of the same people you meet along your path, you'll meet again.
Yeah. Those you meet on your way up are the same folks going to meet on your way down.
That's right.
But it's very true. And you touched on pigeonholing a little bit, which is a really interesting aspect to what we do and has its advantages and disadvantages. I did a movie called Miracle in 2004, and it was a U.S. Olympic hockey team winning a gold medal in the 1980 Olympics. And it was a very intense, and we took it very seriously, the breakdown of how you shoot a hockey movie. And after that, about 10 years of my career, I was doing sports films. And it wasn't because I wanted to, it wasn't because I had a yearning to, or because it was my passion. I enjoyed them, but I was like, if I'm going to get stuck in a pigeonhole, can it be like film noir? It happened to be sports, which was great. It took good care of me. But that's what will happen. You have to ride it out, and then other things come up, and you get known for other things.
And same people too. Like on the most obvious level, like I remember Miracle. Miracle's great. Noah Emmerich's in that, and of course he's in The Americans. So you end up working with the same talent before. So you end up working with the same talent again, and years go by and everything else. You're not necessarily lighting the person in the same way that you were, but you always want people to look their best or the most appropriate for the situation. Let's move into The Americans, which was not long after Suits. So tell me about, the fifth season of that show is some of the most interesting and different sort of stuff. Like you get to go create Moscow, which like before that, any sort of references to sort of this time of early Russia in the 1980s or late 70s that the show plays in, it's always in these little like tiny flashbacks and vignettes. You're playing like current time, doing this. You got two different worlds going on. You've got the world of the U.S. in the mid 80s, and then you also have Russia. Can you talk a little bit about setting that, because that's you? There wasn't that before. You got to establish that look. You got to create everything.
Yeah. Well, full disclosure is that Chris Long, our executive producing director, went to Russia for 3 days and shot for 96 hours continuously. All of the shots of the guy walking across the bridge and all that, they shot at night and at night only. And literally it was 3 days, and it was just Chris. They hired a cinematographer out of Moscow, because I would have gone and done it, but we were busy in Brooklyn shooting the show while this was happening. So there are, in season 5, all throughout the episode, there are segments of Chris's Moscow experience. So that said, all the exteriors, yes, are all real.
I didn't think they were real. I thought that must have been New York or something. I thought you guys were faking it. I was impressed I was impressed, but also there was probably a ton of stage stuff and maybe a little location stuff that you guys did that created the world of Moscow. So I mean, yes. Don't give away all the credit. You still
No, I was gonna take the credit for the interior stuff, which we had a great art department, and so much of the look of the Russia thing came from the things that they scoured whenever possible. I would use Russian fixtures, Russian lamps, practicals I'm talking about, desk lamps, anything that I could get my hands on that was Russian. If we would we would rewire stuff. We would just try to get it all working. And then to keep the Russia stuff feeling like green and cyan and a little off, like everything a little bit off, not full spectrum color, so that it always felt like it was starving of something. And then in the American sections, it would be a little more fleshed out and a little richer. I think the idea was not to make really any kind of comment. It was really just to differentiate the two looks, and we had a LUT that we built for Russian stuff, which had like a cyan highlights, and it was a little bit greener, a little bit cooler in the shadows, and so that was the starting point, and then we would just shape everything based on that. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was a lot of fun. It was an amazing experience, because we had this production situation a little bit unique. We had a stage on the Gowanus Canal, which, if you know the Gowanus Canal, it's a EPA Superfund, one of the most polluted industrial waterways in our nation. And it's also in some of the most valuable real estate in our nation. And we were shooting in this stage, which no longer exists. I believe it's now a water treatment plant, but it's called Eastern Effects. And they had on one side of the canal a bunch of warehouses that we used for all the American stuff. And on the other side, there was a smaller warehouse where we had all the Russian stuff. So we had these two, literally separated by a canal. We had these two different worlds happening. Oftentimes there would be a unit shooting in each world, because the characters very infrequently interacted with each other. It was wonderful for production, because they could set up a whole splinter unit or a whole second unit and have the whole Russian cast available to us. So that was a pretty interesting situation. Also, the way culturally, all the actors were Russian, right? They all were born in Russia, and Russian was their first language. It's very interesting to see the difference on set. The Russians would always rewrite all their dialogue, all of it. They try to. And the reasons that they said was that this Russian is too formal. It's not the way we speak. This is the way we speak. Well, Joe and Joel, the showrunners of the show, wanted it specifically a certain way that people would have talked in the 80s, which is a much more conventional way. So the Joes made a rule that any Russian who wanted to change the dialogue had to do it within 48 hours of the day of shooting, or there was no conversation at all. That put an end to it, because they're very spontaneous. They never, they wouldn't have looked at it and said, I got to say all. They would just go ahead and say, I would never say their arms would be flying. I would never say this. I'd say this. We'd have these conversations, a conversation that takes a half hour, that kills your day. I mean, that's like, we don't have a half hour to talk about this stuff. We got to schedule. We got to keep going. And so that was fun, because it was always like two different shows in a way. Like you're doing the Russian show today and the American show tomorrow. Fun. It's fun. It was a wonderful challenge.
Dan, I think this is a wonderful place to leave it. Thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really glad that we had a chance to chat today. And I hope that maybe after the next season of The Boys, or at some point in the future, you can come back and talk to us some more.
I would love that, Ilya. Thank you for having me, Ilya. It was a pleasure.
All right, so that was Dan Stoloff.
Thanks so much, Dan. Awesome interview, Ilya.
And now, short ends.
Hey, Ben, it's that famous part of the show again. What's your obsession this week?
So my short end is something that I've been enjoying the beta program of since you brought it up actually on this show. While we were talking about it, I was like, holy crap, and I signed up for it. And it was Shot Deck, which is a brilliant idea that I can't believe no one else had ever done. Like, it's just one of those ideas that's just like kind of obvious, but also not as easy to implement well as Shot Deck has really implemented it. And it was created by cinematographer Lawrence Schur. And what Shot Deck is, and anyone who's been in a situation where they were having to build a pitch deck or having to kind of come up with reference frames or whatever. We've all been kind of like randomly doing image searches on Google left and right. What Shot Deck did was it kind of created a brilliant way to consolidate, search for, find, create decks, create groups of images that they could be for your pitch deck. They could be proof of concept to show people what you want something to look like. They could be, basically anything you wanted them to be. So Shot Deck has been around for, I don't know, probably about 2 years at least, maybe 3. And they were beta, so it was free. And now it is a subscription service. But I think it's actually a really worthwhile subscription service to consider. And one of the cool things too is that you can do a year-long plan, or you can do month by month. And I feel like if you're building a project right now and you just need it for a month, that's not a bad investment and not a bad way to be able to find a lot of stuff, organize a lot of stuff. And they're constantly adding new features, new services. Like, they're really trying to bring a lot of value for what they are doing. And I kind of just love the approach, because again, like, I've used Pinterest basically when I'm putting together any project. I'll make a Pinterest board of stuff so that I can show it to people. This is a way more organized way to do that, and it's more kind of industry forward. Nothing against Pinterest, but it's a really great way to find images specifically pulled out of movies. And so, you could do a search for, I want a shot of somebody looking out a window on a wide angle lens and the sun coming through the window. And there's a picture of that on there, like from a real project, from a movie or a TV show or a commercial or something. And there's new stuff being uploaded all the time. So definitely check out Shot Deck. And thank you again for Ilya for making me aware of it.
My pleasure. I really like Lawrence Schur. I think that he is super talented, and it's an incredible service for the industry. And it absolutely makes sense to me that he needs to put some money into it from the, I'm sure, thousands of people who have been in the beta program, because I know it's getting used all the time. And he probably has all these plans to expand and increase its functionality. And I wish him all the best. I really hope that it is hugely successful, and that, it continues to grow and thrive and become a stalwart industry resource. I'm looking forward to see what happens next.
Yeah, we should get him on the show and get him to talk about it.
Absolutely. We should totally do that.
Ilya, what is your short end today?
I think I may have mentioned it in the past, maybe in passing. I don't think it was actually a short end for me, but a friend of the show, Rodney Charters, dropped by Hot Rod Cameras the other day. Oh, wow. Yeah, and it was cool. We got to catch up, and he showed me something really, really pretty amazing. It is a new light, and it's a light that is like a 300-watt light, and I don't think it's terrible to say that it's like similar in sort of form factor and style to like an Aperture 300 light, but what's really interesting about this is it's called the Orion F300FS, which stands for full spectrum. So it's a light. It's a 300 watt light, has a Bowens mount in the front. It's got a separate ballast. It can be powered by either Anton Bauer or V-mount batteries. But what's interesting about it is it doesn't use any white LEDs for any of the colors or white light that it makes. In fact, it uses 6 different colored LEDs, all kind of packed tightly inside of one small space. And so instead of saying like, a lot of lights are RGB, red, green, blue, WW, or they're just a W, they're just a white. They're either a tungsten or a daylight. This is an RGB ACL, which stands for red, green, blue, amber, cyan, and lime. And using those 6
amber
colors,
and lime, that's new on me. I mean, cyan you come across in printing. I've just never heard amber and lime in a lighting instrument.
Amber has actually been around for quite a while, and there are some lights out there that are RGB-A and RGB-AWs, and but beyond all that, this is, yes, RGB-ACL, and it's really cool. Actually, it's a really great light, and it's not terribly expensive. It's a little over $2,000. It's $2,150, and I will say that I'm so impressed by it that Hot Rod Cameras is now selling this product. Rodney Charter's incredibly convincing. He's been shooting with it and using it for quite some time, and I got to say that he's not wrong. It's a really, really cool, powerful, compact RGB light that also does like incredible white ranges, like a white light that's like 2000 Kelvin, which is way, way warm, to 20,000, which is like way, way blue, and kind of everything in the middle. Plus it's got an app control, plus it's got all the sort of features and accessories you'd expect. It's a really impressive light, and I think you're going to see a lot more of that coming here in the near future. It's got some good industry people who've been consulting on it, and I'm really impressed. I can't wait to hear and see more people using this thing, because it's a nice light to have in your kit. Doesn't take up too much space, doesn't take up too much power, has Bowens mount, all the typical accessories. Really impressive. It's called a Pro Light. It's spelt strangely. It's PROLYCHT, which I guess is German for light, is what I've heard. But it looks like Prolicht is what it looks like, but it's Pro Light, and it's called the Orion F300FS, or full spectrum.
Well, I don't mean to be such a raving fanboy, but if Rodney Charters likes something, I assume it's awesome. Rodney knows his shit.
Yes, Rodney pops in every now and again.
I didn't know that.
He pops in.
I'm so jealous. I just want to hear him tell crazy stories.
Well, we don't always get into stories, but sometimes he'll be like, Ilya, I got to show you this cool piece of something. I got to show you this thing I've been working with. So no, he's really generous. He's really fantastic. I really appreciate him. And sometimes I show him things, which is always nice. We have a nice sort of like equal exchange, but he came in with this light and showed me, it's got this cool gobo attachment kind of thing. So it's not quite like a Leica, but it's got an iris, and it's got a whole bunch of different sort of like gobo frames that you can kind of pop in there, and it's got a Fresnel, and it's got soft boxes, and it works with all the other sort of stuff out there that's in Bowens mount. It's fun. It's a cool light with all the sort of attachments that you'd want, and it's not terribly expensive. And I think it'll plug into what anyone out there is doing, especially if they're looking for something with lots of colors and effects and that sort of stuff.
That is awesome. Well, cool. Next time Rodney just decides to stop by, just please tell him I said hello. I always remember the day that we interviewed him, and then afterwards he wanted to go get lunch, and we went to the Federal and had lunch with Rodney Charters, and I was kind of geeking out the whole time.
That's right. I forgot about that, but no, that's right. And that was tons of fun.
I'm such a raving fanboy of his work. He's an inspiration. He's amazing. So anyway, who do we have to thank today, as opposed to all the other times?
Hey, let's thank Alana Cody. Alana Cody, producer, putting these shows together, keeping us busy with interviews. I think you even did one today.
We did 3 interviews this week.
I know.
Just this week.
And that's not atypical, actually, for us. We've actually been doing a lot of interviews lately, so...
We've been doing more interviews since the pandemic started, way more than before, because we said, fuck it, we'll do them on Zoom. And that opened us up to the whole world, not just people who happen to be in the metro LA area.
That's true. And before that, we really did kind of turn up our noses at people who weren't in the same room as us, because we wanted to maintain...
Oh, you're in Australia? No, thanks.
Yeah, NPR style quality. And frankly, you couldn't really do that as easily. And even now with the pandemic, for us to get high sound quality is a bit of a challenge, but I think we're certainly punching above average. I think we're doing okay. So
we're doing okay. I wonder, I know we're in the middle of things, but do you think we're ever going to return to, you have to come to Hot Rod Cameras and we're just going to interview people in your conference room ever again? Or do you think we're going to be doing this, around the world kind of thing, or a combo? Do you think we're going to go combo?
I think it's going to be a combo. Already people are talking to me about wanting to use the screening room at Hot Rod, and people are talking to me about wanting to do in-person events at Hot Rod. So I think that those days are coming sooner rather than later. And, we have to do some basic precautions, but the truth of the matter is that for people who are vaccinated, the risks are extremely low now, and so a lot of in-person stuff starting to return, which is great.
I'm honestly not against it. Went to the park today with my boy, no masks. It was all great. Anyway, we should also thank Ben Katz, our intrepid, amazing editor, whose unenviable task is making you and I not sound like morons.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate that. And let's thank Kay Zalatrachi, who composes great music for us, has composed all the music you heard in this episode, but is probably not listening.
100% chance he did not listen to this episode.
Yeah, 100% chance, for sure.
Ilya, where can people find you online?
You can find me over at Hot Rod Cameras. Hot Rod Cameras sponsor this show. Yeah, I'm there Monday through Friday, most of the hours, and sometimes some odd hours. And if you want to talk about buying equipment, if you want to talk about building a studio, we do that on the regular. We're actually, we just did a massive, I shouldn't say who the company is for because I didn't get their permission, but we just did a massive package for them with a whole lot of Panasonic gear and a whole lot of Cook lenses and a bunch of other fun stuff. So
I'm going to ask you off mic.
Yeah. So, and I think they want to do a lot more of it with us. So that's been really good. So yes, if you got stuff in the works and you need some technical help, or you just need help in putting the package together, let us know, because that's what we do. That is absolutely what we do. We do it for governments and for universities and private corporations. And I'll stop talking about it myself now. Ben, where can people find you?
You can find me at benrockonline.com, and you can there you can find all of my social medias. I'm on all the social media things that Gen Xers and older are on, and none of the TikToks or Snapchats that the younger people are doing. So
okay. So you don't have any shuffle dances and dog filters.
I don't know, no pirate shanties.
Okay. No flossing, no dabs. Okay.
Actually, I don't even know what the hell any of that is. But
okay, awesome.
I guess I don't.
Wait till your kid gets a little bit older. You'll get all the lingo.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait to misuse the lingo like a weird parent in a John Hughes movie. Anyway, so yeah, you can find me there. Befriend me on the Instagrams or the Twitters or the LinkedIn, the LinkedIn. Nah, that's
a thing. That's not a
plural.
Thing. Yeah.
Even Facebook, as long as you're not Trumpy, I'll probably say yes. Anyway,
you'll say yes even if they're Trumpy. I know you.
I will not. Anyway,
what about if they're a flat earther? If they're a flat earther, you're totally saying
I'm okay
yes.
with flat earthers.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
I'm okay with I don't care if you believe the earth is flat. You're a silly person, but that's not that's between you and your stupidity.
I'm so glad I got this insight into you right now.
Flat earthers, UFO people, Ancient Aliens fans.
Ancient Aliens,
I'm a fan of the TV
huge
show.
Hot Rod Cameras customer, by the way.
Are they?
They are.
I love that show.
Yeah, me. I know that actually I haven't really seen that show very much, but I know that you're a huge fan. That is like your crack. You love it.
I nonstop. I yell at the screen like an old man yelling at the news while I watch Ancient Aliens the whole time.
I love those people. They buy all their cameras from us. It's really great.
It's a really well-made show. I'll just say that.
Okay.
Anyway, that's enough of that, and we will see you next week here at the Cinematography Podcast.
Thanks for listening.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.